Yeah, I need to learn to keep my mouth shut. So, for the second time on this channel, I've been caught with my pants down. Wait, that doesn't sound right. If you cast your minds back to last year, when I uploaded my 2003 WRC video, I mentioned at the time that I thought it was highly unlikely that two-time World Rally Champion Kalle Rovanperä would switch to a part-time schedule in 2024 on the basis that the rumour at the time had gone silent. Well, a couple of weeks after I made that video, news dropped that Kalle would end up doing the thing that I said he wouldn't do, leaving me with egg on my face. Now, fast forward to May of this year, and it was announced that Adrian Newey, after nearly 2 decades with Red Bull, would be leaving the Milton Keynes outfit, essentially going on gardening leave after the conclusion of the Miami Grand Prix. Since the news dropped, speculation was rife as to where his next destination would be if he were to stay in F1, given there were brief rumours about him moving over to the America's Cup or even going into retirement. In a video I made 4 months ago reacting to the news of Adrian's departure, I brought up 3 teams he was rumoured to potentially join, 2 of which I thought were likely destinations, the other not so much. These 3 teams being Ferrari, Williams and of course Aston Martin. And guess which one I said was less likely? Yep, you guessed it, it was Aston Martin. My reasoning for this was because of an article that stated that Newey was more than likely not going to join Aston Martin due to an apparent disagreement he had with team owner and F1's resident Bond villain Lawrence Stroll. And for a while, it did seem like that was the case, as it was heavily rumoured that he would go to either Ferrari or even return to Williams. But over the last few weeks, rumours had surfaced that Aston went back in for Adrian and essentially offered him a deal that he couldn't refuse. And so this past Tuesday, via a live press conference from Aston Martin themselves, it was announced that Adrian would indeed be joining the team from 2025 in what is reported to be a 5-year deal that will see Adrian getting paid around £30 million a year. And once again, I've ended up with egg on my face to the point where it has now stained my shirt. Given I made a video reacting to the news about his departure from Red Bull, I felt it was worth doing a follow-up video, this time reacting to the news about him joining Aston Martin and whether I believe it will be a good move or a bad move. Whether this video ends up being long or short, I'm not sure yet. Anyways, let's get on with it. So, what is my reaction to this news? Well, apart from having egg on my face again, I can't say I'm not surprised. There was just something about Adrian Newey going to Aston Martin that just seemed like an obvious choice, and no, it had nothing to do with his manager, who by the way is Eddie Jordan. Only found that out recently, I guess you learn something every day. For starters, for anyone who is somehow unaware, Aston Martin will essentially become a manufacturer team in 2026 as they will be ditching customer Mercedes engines after next year to form a partnership with Honda, becoming the only team to run the engines as a result of Red Bull ending their alliance with the Japanese manufacturer after 2025 to form a partnership with Ford in essentially a reunion that dates back to 2004 when the team were known as Jaguar, who at the time were owned by the American car giant. With new regulations coming in for 2026 to both the look of the cars and the engines, there is a massive opportunity for any of the 10 teams, should have been 11 had Liberty Media not chucked their toys out of the pram, to make leaps and bounds in the pecking order. And with Adrian joining the team, who is known for loving a regulation change, this could be the greatest opportunity Aston Martin have in becoming a serious contender and finally being in a position to fight for wins and championships, which is something the team hasn't done since 1999, back when they were known as Jordan. Plus, Adrian does have a bit of history with Aston, not only because they used to be a title sponsor for Red Bull between 2018 and 2020, but he was also the brains behind the Aston Martin Valkyrie, which after many years in the making, will finally be making its hypercar debut in the World Endurance Championship next year via the Heart of Racing Endurance team. On top of this, Adrian's arrival at the team couldn't have come at a better time, as apart from the regulation change that is happening in 2026, the team recently moved into a new headquarters, which is a lot bigger than their previous factory, in order to accommodate a lot more staff, and in turn, in-house a new wind tunnel, in order to improve efficiency, rather than hiring out an existing wind tunnel away from their factory. The new facilities will definitely be beneficial in every sector of the team, particularly for the designers, something that will definitely assist Adrian when he oversees the design project if he is to make the team a front-running contender. So with that being said, will this end up being a success? Honestly, as much as I would like to say yes, given it's Adrian Newey, and the idea of seeing Fernando Alonso as a title contender again would be something amazing, I really don't know. You would like to think that by having Adrian Newey on board in time for when the 2026 regulations come into fruition, that it would pay off, but honestly, there are two things that I have concerns with. One being the timing of when Adrian will be joining the team, as confirmed by Adrian himself during the live press conference, he will be starting work in March. Now why is that a concern, I hear you ask? Well, because I fear that Aston will end up being behind when it comes to developing the 2026 car. For anyone unaware, teams are not allowed to work on their 2026 car until the first day of 2025, which at the time of recording is just under 4 months away. Now although the teams can't work on the 2026 car until then, they are still allowed to plan and design the car beforehand once the regulations have been finalised and released, which according to a few articles I've read will be in mid-October, which is next month. With Adrian officially starting work 5 months after that, I generally fear that the months without Adrian in the team could end up hampering their development. Now granted, Adrian could still assist in designing the car from home, but with him being away from the factory during that time and pretty much not being there to oversee the project, it could end up being a huge problem for Aston, and I generally hope for their sake that that isn't the case, especially when they have Fernando Alonso in their team, who is desperate to win a third world title before he retires. Well, that is, if that is the plan anyway. You see, we all know that Alonso isn't getting any younger, and he's pretty much nearing retirement. I mean, the guy's 43 for goodness sake. His contract with Aston Martin runs out at the end of 2026, and whilst he does have an option to stay with the team for another year, which to be honest it wouldn't surprise me if he did take up that option given it's Fernando Alonso, there does appear to be this feeling that maybe Aston have their eyes on another driver, like Max Verstappen. Now, yes, that does sound a bit far-fetched, but hear me out. Now, I am aware, of course, that Max has a contract with Red Bull until the end of 2028, but given the slump in pace Red Bull have had recently, to the point where McLaren, Ferrari and Mercedes are on their coattails, it may lead to Max being disorientated with Red Bull as a whole, especially now that Adrian is no longer working with the team. As mentioned in my previous video about Adrian, there are examples of teams falling off a cliff when Adrian departs from them, and I think it is safe to say that with Red Bull's rivals closing up on them, we are now starting to see the effects of that. While there have been reports that Max could go to Mercedes should he want to leave Red Bull early given he has a breakaway clause in his contract, there were rumours that came out last month that Max could end up joining Aston Martin, with Lawrence Stroll himself launching a bid for his services. With both Adrian Newey and Honda moving over to Aston for 2026, it could tempt Max in wanting to join them, especially if Red Bull's slump continues any further. Max joining Aston would essentially boot Fernando out of the door, and as much as I would want to see a Max-Fernando partnership, we just know that's not going to happen, which is where my other concern lies. Whilst F1's resident Bond villain has made it clear that he wants Aston Martin to become world champions in the future, he has also made it quite clear, without even mentioning it, that he wants his son Lance to still be a part of those plans. Now I think it is very clear from people viewing on the outside that Lance just simply isn't good enough to race for a top team, and I think the first half of last year proved that, as whilst Fernando was fighting regularly for podiums, in a car which at the time was the second best in race performance, Lance was nowhere to be seen, often languishing down in the lower reaches of the point, and even at times being outside the top 10, thanks in large to his terrible qualifying sessions. Now, granted, there are times where Lance can put in the odd good performance, but when it comes to keeping that up on a consistent basis, he struggles to do that, and if Aston are insistent on keeping Lance on board, which appears to be the case given the certain language team boss Mike Crack used to compare Lance's performances to Alonso last year, I fear that no matter who they have in the other car, whether that's Max or Fernando, it's going to hold the team back, especially in the constructors. As we are seeing with Red Bull this year, whilst it's alright having one driver fight for the title, which in this case is Max Verstappen, having the other driver, which is Sergio Perez, not being there to support his teammate when Max is fighting with a rival team, which has been the case a lot this year, is going to hold the team back in the constructors, and it could lead to them losing out on a lot of prize money. Now, unless Lance has a dramatic turn in performance before 2026 arrives, I can't see how that's going to benefit the team going forward, especially if they are in a close fight with another team, and when you consider that there are plenty of drivers out there who could fill the role that Lance is occupying and do a much better job. But these are the only concerns I have. Obviously, I am definitely looking forward to seeing what Adrian can do at Aston, and I hope it turns out to be successful for him, but it wouldn't surprise me if these concerns I have end up being true. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and let me know your thoughts about Adrian joining Aston. Thanks for watching, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and I will see you next week for the next video.